The stars over Sector 17 Delta were calm, silent, and unbroken as they had been for centuries. The void of space stretching endlessly in every direction with not a single sign of disturbance. For the Empire's fleet stationed there, this sector was considered the safest in all their territories, a quiet corner of space where nothing ever happened. Where patrols were routine, and where soldiers often joked that the only threat was boredom itself, the Empire's largest defense platforms floated above the key outposts, shining metal giants bristling with weapons, while patrol cruisers glided lazily through the dark. Every scanner, every cumline, every eye was watching, yet none of them saw the danger coming. None of them were ready for the signal that changed everything. It was a simple pinch, just a whisper across deep space. One sensor outpost caught it first. An unidentified object had crossed into the sector, moving fast, on a direct path through the Empire's most secure borders. At first, the officers barely reacted. An error, they thought. Maybe a civilian freighter that's straight off course. Maybe a rogue asteroid. But then the signal came again, clearer this time. An object of unknown design, unknown origin, with energy signatures that didn't match any known species in the Empire's database. Silent shadow, moving fast, without any broadcast, without any identification. Within minutes, the calm of the sector broke like glass underfoot. Alarms blared. Commands echoed through comms. The nearest patrol ships, 2 light cruisers and a gunship, were ordered to intercept and make contact. But deep down, in the cold parts of their minds where instinct still whispered, the officers felt something they hadn't known in years: unease. The intercept ships launched at full speed, engines burning bright, their crews on high alert. They hailed the intruder repeatedly. No response. They ran deep scans. No match. The object kept moving steady, silent, unblinking like it didn't care who or what stood in its way. The fleet commander, a veteran of countless campaigns, ordered weapons armed but held back the order to fire. Whoever this was, they were deep in Empire space. It was impossible for any enemy to have made it this far unnoticed. The idea of a real threat seemed laughable, but the laughter died when the intercept team vanished. Without warning, without a single distress call. One moment, the cruisers were transmitting calmly, reporting visual contact with a strange black vessel, sleek, angular, shaped like nothing seen before. The next moment, silence, static, empty channels, their transponders blinked out. Gone. Panic spread like fire through the command ranks. More ships were dispatched. Defense platforms powered up weapons that hadn't fired in decades. Fighters launched in tight formations, scanning every inch of space. And then, slowly, terrifyingly, the black shape emerged from the shadows right into full sensor range. The first image came through the fleet's command center, a dark warship, smooth as glass, bristling with strange weaponry. Hull scarred but intact. No Empire markings, no known insignia, no signals. It moved in utter silence, not as if it were hiding, but as if it simply didn't care who saw it. The commanders froze when the ship's identity finally came through translation systems. One word, one species, a name pulled from old archives. From half-forgotten reports of battles at the distant edges of the galaxy, a name that sent cold terror through every officer on that bridge. Human. No one spoke. No one breathed. Humans, deathworlders, monsters of flesh and steel, survivors of the most brutal, savage world in the known galaxy. The Empire's last war against them had been so long ago that most in this sector barely remembered it. A skirmish far from here, resolved in treaties and distance. But now, one of their ships was here, inside the Empire's most secure space, moving without permission. Without warning, the commander's hands trembled as he barked the order. All ships attack. No signals, no negotiation. Destroy it. The void lit up with fire. The Empire's finest weapons unleashed everything: plasma beams, kinetic railguns, missiles tipped with fusion cores. Hundreds of projectiles roared through space toward the black shape. But the human warship moved. It didn't rush. It didn't panic. It slid sideways, impossibly fast for something its size, dodging the first volleys with an unnatural grace. What it couldn't dodge, it absorbed shields flaring, hull armor boiling, but it kept moving, and then it fired back. The first shot tore an Empire. Frigate and Hoffa, single glowing beam that sliced through shields and hull like paper. Duh. Second shot crippled a defense platform. The third hit a fuel depot, igniting a chain of explosions that spread like wildfire. In minutes, the fleet was in chaos. Command channels flooded with screams, with orders, with desperate calls for reinforcements. But none of it mattered. The humans didn't stop. They didn't communicate. They didn't ask. For surrender, they simply advanced in the control tower of the sector's command station. The highest-ranking officer, a four-limbed alien named Varkstud. Frozen as the human ship closed in, his hands trembled. His voice was gone. He watched as his ships burned one by one, as his best soldiers died without ever seeing their enemy face to face. And he understood far too late what this really was. This wasn't war. It was execution, somewhere deep in his heart. He whispered the words that would later echo across the entire empire as the beginning of the end. This sector was supposed to be secure. The human warship kept moving, engines burning cold, and silent through the wreckage of what had once been an empire's strongest fleet. And the nightmare had only just begun. The wreckage drifted like broken bones across the darkness of the sector. Shattered hulls, dead engines, glowing debris. The Empire's once mighty fleet, so confident, so proud, was now nothing more than twisted metal spinning through endless black. And in the center of it all, untouched, unstoppable, the human warship glided forwards, slow, deliberate, silent. No one in the Empire had ever seen anything like it. The ships they had built were masterpieces of engineering, armed with weapons, powerful enough to destroy moons, protected by shields that had withstood centuries of conflict. But all of it, every piece of brilliance, every ounce of firepower, had fallen apart the moment the humans appeared. It wasn't just the weapons. It was how they moved, how they fought. It was the cold, methodical precision that tore through defenses, like they were nothing at all. In the shattered control center of the command station, Vark stood frozen, eyes locked on the holomap that no longer showed a fleet, only debris. Breathing came in sharp gasps. Officers around him whispered in panic, voices breaking as they tried to restore order where none remained. The incoming message lines were full of static. Distress signals echoed in from distant outpost reports of unknown signals, power failures, of soldiers vanishing without trace. The human warship was no longer alone. Other signals, smaller, sharper, began appearing on the Empire's scanners drop pods. Stealth craft? Boarding vessels. They moved beneath the human ship's shadow, descending toward the outer defense stations and supply bases. Invasion had begun. We have to stop them. One officer cried, slamming his fists on the console. Send everything, fighters, reserves, it's too late, another whispered, voice hollow with dread. And it was. The Empire's second wave launched in desperation, dozens of fighter squadrons streaking through the black sky, tiny engines flaring blue as they swarmed toward the human ship. From the station's windows, they looked like silver needles stabbing at the dark. But it was useless. The human warship opened fire. The sky erupted in silence. Laser bursts, kinetic slugs, unseen electronic pulses that shut down entire fighter. Wings mid-flight. Ships vanished in flashes of white light. Others spiraled out of control, crashing into the remains of their own fleet. The battle, if it could even be called that, lasted less than 4 minutes. The humans didn't stop. Across the sector, the first outposts began going dark. Communications cut. Power grids failed. Empire soldiers strained and equipped for standard. Wars found themselves under attack by enemies they couldn't see, couldn't understand. The human boarding parties were unlike anything they had faced. Fast, silent, ruthless. They moved through corridors like shadows, their armor dark and featureless, their weapons precise and merciless. Entire garrisons fell without a single distress call. Some Empire soldiers, terrified, broken, fled without firing a shot. Others locked themselves in bunkers, sending frantic messages that went unanswered. Panic spread faster than any enemy ever could, and always. The same whisper passed from survivor to survivor. Deathworlders. Vark watched the chaos unfold on screen after screen, his scaled hands shaking, his mind sinking deeper into numb terror. Somewhere in his memory, he recalled the old stories, whispers of Earth, of the humans who had once burned entire enemy fleets in wars long forgotten. He had never believed those stories. No one had. The humans were supposed to be weak, fragile, primitive, but what moved through the ruins now was not weakness. It was a cold, unstoppable force. "Order evacuation," he croaked, his voice barely more than breath. One of the junior officers hesitated. "Siraz's orders are to hold. There is no holding," Vark snapped, slamming his fist down. "Evacuate, now." The order rippled across the remaining stations. Shuttles launched in waves, their engines screaming as they fled toward distant systems. Transports overloaded with terrified soldiers and civilians. But even as they ran, it became clear there was nowhere safe. The human warship moved too fast. Its reach was too long. It struck without warning, picking off the fleeing ships one by one like a predator hunting broken prey. And still, the humans never spoke. No messages, no demands, no face to put to the terror. Just cold, clinical destruction. Every movement precise, every strike lethal. The few Empire ships that managed to survive long enough to see the attackers up close reported the same nightmare. Human soldiers with blank visors. Faces hidden, weapons steady, showing no hesitation as they cut down defenders with perfect aim. It wasn't war. It was something worse. On one burning outpost, an alien captain clutched his wounded arm as the human team approached black armored figures, silent as the grave. He begged for mercy, pleaded in 3 languages. The humans didn't answer. One raised her weapon. The shot was clean, fast, cold. Back on the command station, the lights flickered as systems failed. Power drains spread through the walls. Vark stumbled as the deck beneath him trembled. Somewhere deep in the station, hull breaches were tearing through the lower levels. He could hear the distant thud of explosions. Screams. "They're boarding." "Us," someone gasped, voice broken. "They're here." The officers turned to run. The lights went out. In the dark, Vark stood alone, shaking breath shallow. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of footsteps echoed slow, steady, growing closer. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He knew what was coming. They all did. The humans didn't leave survivors. The black shapes entered the command deck without a word, its weapons raised, its movements flawless. In the last second, Vark met the cold, unreadable eyes behind the human soldier's visor and realized this wasn't about conquest. It was about something far deeper, something older. The Empire had awoken something they could never control. The shot ended his thoughts before he could understand it. And far above, the human warship continued its path of silent destructions, slow, precise, and unstoppable. The breach was complete. The Empire's territory burned in silence. All across the sector that had once been called secure, the lights were going out station after station, ship after ship, defense after defense, falling in cold, brutal silence. The human warship drifted through the wreckage like a dark ghost, engines glowing dimly, weapons cooling but ready. While the rest of the galaxy held its breath in fear, there were no more battles in open space, no more fleets to meet the human advance. The Empire's pride had shattered like glass, and now the real nightmare began, the invasion. But it was not an invasion like the Empire had known before. There were no massive armies, no long-winded declarations, no calls for surrender. There were only small, sharp strikes, surgical, merciless each, one cutting deeper into the heart. Of the Empire's worlds, the first planet fell before anyone on the Empire's high command could even react. It was a minor colony lightly defended, home to thousands of citizens who had never seen real war. The human landing craft came silently in the dark, slipping through atmosphere shields, bypassing defenses, touching down without sound. By the time ground sensors detected the breach, it was already too late. The human soldiers moved through the colony streets like living shadows, black armor, visors down, silent weapons. They did not hesitate. They did not shout. They did not speak. They cleared buildings one by one. No wasted shots, no unnecessary destruction. Those who resisted died instantly. Those who surrendered were ignored, bypassed as if they didn't matter. The humans weren't here for occupation. They were here for something colder, destruction without mercy. In the Empire's central command, far from the front, the reports came in broken and frantic, screaming voices over static. Pleas for reinforcements. Panic-stricken calls from planetary governors who had never thought war would touch them. The High Command, the same officials who once boasted that no foreign power could ever breach their borders, sat frozen in horror, unable to make decisions as the nightmare unfolded. They're not following any known battle patterns. One officer whispered, his hands shaking as he watched the images of burning cities. We can't predict them. We can't stop them. The Empire's supreme strategist, an ancient figure named Jor Tal, who had served through 10 wars and countless skirmishes, stared without blinking at the devastation. His voice was barely audible. This is not war, he said softly. It is extermination. And still, the humans did not send messages. Still, they did not issue demands. The only communication was through the wreckage they left behind, the silent proof that they were there. They were moving forward, that nothing would stand in their way. The second planet fell just hours later. This one had a proper military base, a defense fleet in orbit, ground forces numbering in the thousands, but none of it mattered. The human warship arrived above the planet without resistance. Its weapons struck with surgical precision shield generators first, then orbital defenses, then power grids. Within minutes, the ground base lost communication. Its commanders shouting orders that no one could follow. Human landing craft touched down in the ruins. The soldiers inside. The infamous Death Worlders moved without words. They cleared entire blocks of the base in coordinated, terrifying silence. Empire soldiers, desperate and broken, fired wildly, but the human return fire was cold and precise. No missed shots, no wasted movement. They advanced step by step, leaving nothing but bodies and broken machines in their path. A single Empire soldier, wounded and gasping for breath as he hid behind the shattered wreck of a troop transport, lifted his head just long enough to glimpse the human figures advancing, black armor, blank visors, silent weapons. He whispered in broken terror, "They don't even flinch." And then he too was gone. By the time the Empire's High Command organized a response fleet cobbled together. From distant systems and rushed in desperation toward the front, the Third World was already burning. The human warship had moved again, faster than the Empire could track. More dropships, more silent soldiers, more planetary systems falling like dominoes. The fear spread faster than the humans themselves in the outer colonies. Citizens began abandoning settlements before the humans even arrived. Entire populations fled into deep space, clogging warp routes with broken-down transports. Soldiers deserted in record numbers. Some officers refused to carry out orders, convinced that resistance was pointless. The name human was no longer just an enemy, was terror itself. Even within the Empire's leadership, cracks appeared. Some called for immediate surrender, but to whom? The humans weren't talking. Others called for the use of forbidden weapons, planet burners, bioweapons, system-level detonators. But those who spoke of such desperation knew, deep down, that none of it would matter, because the humans didn't fight for territory, they fought to erase. In the ruins of the second planet's main city, one of the few surviving civilians and an elderly alien who had once served as a teacher stood in the rubble, staring up at the black shape of the human ship as it drifted high above. Her voice trembled as she spoke to no one. They didn't come to conquer, they came to punish. Her words would later be recorded by distant systems, played over emergency broadcasts. The galaxy was starting to understand. This wasn't just another war. It was a message. And across the Empire, From distant moons to glittering capital cities, the question echoed everywhere in whispered horror. What had they done to deserve this? Could anything stop what was coming next? The heart of the empire trembled. For thousands of years, their borders had stretched across star systems, their fleets unmatched, their worlds untouched by any foreign enemy. They had called themselves unbreakable, untouchable, eternal. But now, the cracks were spreading fast, splintering their military, their government, their very belief in their own strength, because a single human warship had crossed into their space. And everything they thought they knew about war was falling apart. In the shadowed halls of the Imperial Command Citadel, the highest rulers gathered behind sealed doors. Their faces, once proud, once cold, were pale with fear. Holograms showed the truth in every detail. Worlds burning, ships shattered, cities erased. More than 20 systems had already gone dark. The humans didn't pause. They didn't negotiate. They kept moving, system by system. The cold precision of a machine built for one purpose: punishment. "We must strike back," one general shouted, his voice shaking. "We must gather the core fleets." "With what?" another interrupted. Bitterly, "We've already thrown everything we have at them. We've lost half the sector's forces, and they haven't even slowed down. They're just one ship," another leader barked. But the words sounded hollow, even as he said, "Them, one ship." That was the terror of it. Just one. But somehow, that one human warship was dismantling an empire, across the empire's core worlds. Panic was spreading faster than the invaders. Civilian transports jammed the orbital stations, thousands of ships fleeing in blind terror toward the outer systems. Food supplies collapsed. Communications between key worlds broke down. On distant colonies, soldiers abandoned posts without orders. Some planets, fearing the inevitable, declared themselves neutral. Refusing to answer the Empire's calls for aid, no one trusted the government anymore, and in the shadows of every whispered conversation. The name spread like wildfire. Humans, Deathworlders, silent killers from the edge of the galaxy. The Empire's highest minds searched for answers, desperate to understand why this was happening. For days, entire departments dug through ancient war records, old treaties, first contact files. The last direct conflict with humans had been centuries ago, a border skirmish. Brutal but brief, with no formal surrender, no lasting peace. The Empire had assumed the humans had faded into irrelevance. Now, they knew how wrong they had been. In a private underground bunker, the Empire's lead war historiana, fragile elderly figure with sharp eyes, whispered to the remaining council, "Members, we forgot what they are. We forgot what their world made them. Thought they were soft because we only saw them in peace, but they come from death. Everything about their nature is survival. They don't fight to conquer, they fight to end threats." And that, in the end, was the terrifying truth. The humans didn't want territory. They weren't here to rule. They were here to break the Empire's spine, and then walk away. Far from the Citadel, on the battlefront, the human warship pressed deeper into Imperial space. Every outpost it passed fell in hours. Defense fleets that had taken decades to build were reduced to drifting wreckage in minutes. Empire ships tried everything: ambushes, mines, EMP strikes, but none of it worked. The human ship adapted too fast. Its weapons struck too hard. Its soldiers, those silent, black-armored Deathworlders, moved through every battlefield with terrifying calm, leaving no survivors when they chose not to, at one shattered station. An Empire captain watched through cracked observation glass as the human ship loomed above his dying world. Fires burned across the sky. His voice, shaking with despair, whispered the same words heard on every channel: "We can't stop them." And deep in the human ship, the soldiers worked in cold silence. They repaired armor. They cleaned weapons. No cheers, no anger, just cold, controlled efficiency. They didn't speak of conquest or glory. They didn't speak of the lives they were taking. They simply moved forward, one target at a time, because their mission had already been decided. No one touched Earth and walked away. It's unpunished. Back in the Empire's command center, desperation gave way to madness. The rulers, once so calm, so sure, now argued with rising panic. Some demanded the use of forbidden weapons, planet killers, biological agents, black hole generators. Others called for surrender, though none of them knew how to make contact. With the humans, every day more systems fell, more soldiers died. More ships vanished into the void, and through it all, the human warship said nothing. No demands, no communication, only silence. The Empire's people began to lose faith. Entire colonies broke away, declaring independence. Some planetary governors surrendered in advance, hoping to be spared. Others called for resistance to the last breath, but none of it mattered. The humans kept moving, cold and steady, without ever slowing down. On one transmission leaked from a frontline officer. Whisper of raw terror was broadcast across the Empire's networks. They don't fight like we do. They don't fear death. They don't need sleep. They move like machines. We can't win. That message spread like wildfire. It wasn't just soldiers who were giving up. Civilians were losing hope. The Empire's once mighty grip over its people was slipping through its fingers, and still, the human warship came. The Empire cracked, and far, far above the burning systems. The humans prepared for the next phase of their silent Marcia path that would lead them straight to the Empire's heart, straight to the homeworld. The Empire's outer defenses were gone. Worlds once shining with the lights of towering cities now drifted in darkness. The blackened skeletons of ships and space stations floated through the void like silent graves. And the human warship, silent, relentless, pressed ever deeper. Moving closer to the Empire's heart with every passing hour, across the core systems, panic exploded. These were the richest worlds, the political and military centers, the ancient planets where the Empire had been born. For generations, the citizens of the core believed themselves untouchable. Untouchable by war, untouchable by fear. But as news poured in of the human ship's unstoppable advance, everything changed. Gripped the cities. Spaceports jammed with ships trying to flee. Riots broke out as frightened civilians scrambled for any chance to escape. And above them, the Empire's last remaining fleet scrambled to form a final defensive line. The last wall. Hundreds of warships. Everything the Empire could still pull together assembled in orbit over the homeworld. Massive dreadnoughts, carrier battlegroups, missile platforms, fighters by the thousands. The greatest military force ever gathered in the Empire's long history. And yet, every commander knew the truth. It wouldn't be enough. On the bridge of the Empire's flagship, Supreme Commander Darvus, the last surviving member of the original War Council, stood motionless, his eyes fixed on the distant stars. His face was pale. His hands trembled. He had fought in countless battles, but nothing in his long life had prepared him for this. They've passed through 26 systems without pause. One officer reported, voice barely steady. No communications, no demands. Evade defense. Shattered. Another officer whispered, "They're not coming to take our worlds. They're coming to burn them." And above the growing fear, one question haunted every mind. Why? Why were the humans doing this? The truth was as simple as it was terrifying. Revenge. No one knew what had triggered the invasion. Some said the Empire's military had attacked an unregistered human colony by mistake. Others whispered of covert strikes on human supply lines. But whatever the cause, the humans had not responded with warnings or diplomacy. They had responded with silence and death. The Empire's final wall stretched across the stars like a glowing line of steel. The ships were armed. The defenses were charged. Every gun, every missile, every shield stood ready. And then the human ship arrived. It came without fanfare, without light, without sound. One moment the scanners were clear, the next there it was. The alien cruise. Thousands of soldiers aboard dozens of ships stared in frozen terror as the dark shape of the human warship emerged into sensor range. It was smaller than many of the Empire's massive vessels, but its presence was heavier than gravity itself. The way it moved, smooth, silent, unhurried, sent a chill through even the bravest commanders. And then it fired. The first shot was surgical. A plasma beam tore through one of the Empire's lead cruisers, slicing the ship clean in half. The explosion lit the sky. Before anyone could react, the second shot followed, crippling a missile frigate, sending burning debris tumbling into space. And then came the human fighters. Smaller, black ships, sleek and silent, poured from the warship's hangar. They moved with impossible speed, weaving through the Empire's defenses like shadows. Empire fighters scrambled to intercept, but they were too slow, too clumsy. The human pilots, deathworlders in black armor, showed no mercy. Empire ships exploded one after another. In the command deck of the Empire's flagship, alarms screamed. Officers shouted orders. Darvos stood frozen, watching in horror as his carefully arranged defensive line began to collapse before the battle had truly begun. "They're cutting through," one officer gasped. "We can't hold. Keep firing," Darvos roared. But even as he spoke, he knew it was hopeless. The human warship advanced without pause. Its shields flickered, but held. Its weapons struck with terrifying precision. No wasted shots, no random destruction. Every blast was deliberate, calculated. Cold Empire. Dreadnought ships that had ruled battles for centuries were torn apart in minutes. Fighters vanished in swarms of fire. One by one, the ships of the Empire's final wall died in silence. And, above the battlefield, human warship never stopped moving forward. The surviving Empire ships began to break formation. Some fled. Some held their ground in suicidal bravery. But nothing changed the outcome. Within hours, the Empire's greatest fleet was gone. The homeworld lay defenseless. On the planet below, the panic became full terror. Broadcasts showed the burning wreckage in orbit. Citizens screamed in the streets. Military leaders, those few still alive, argued over what little remained of their shattered defense. And then, the shadow of the human warship darkened the skies. From the highest towers of the Empire's capital city, the people looked up and saw death approaching. The black ship, silent as ever, began its descent. Orbital strikes lit the clouds. Defense grids failed. Entire cities went dark. Darvos, aboard his crippled flagship, stared at the burning world below. As his ship listed in the void, he whispered the last words of the Empire in a broken voice. "We were never ready." The human soldiers landed before dawn. The invasion of the Empire's core had begun, and the nightmare was far from over. The Empire's homeworld shivered under the weight of fear. Smoke and ash painted the skies black as the once proud capital cities trembled beneath the cold shadow of the human warship. For generations, the Empire had called itself eternal, its strength unmatched, its rule unbreakable. That belief was dust. The final wall, the last defense, was crumbling. Death was already at their door. The streets below were filled with chaos. Sirens wailed. Civilians ran without direction, eyes lifted to the burning heavens, where the wreckage of their greatest fleet still drifted in silent testimony to the power that had come to destroy them. Government towers, military bases, entire districts had already gone dark as power grids failed and communication lines collapsed. Even the ruling council, once so cold and certain, had fractured into desperation and madness. They watched from the fortified command citadel as the human warship descended in eerie silence, cutting through the clouds like a blade through flesh. No communication, no warning, no demands. Just movements low, steady, unstoppable. "We have to stop them," one counselor whispered. His voice cracked and broken. "With what?" Another rasped. "Our fleet is gone. Our weapons are useless. We can't even scratch their hull." Panic and disbelief choked the air. These were the men and women who had ruled over hundreds of worlds, commanded armies that could erase planets. And yet now, they stood helpless in these shadows in the face of something ancient, something cold, something beyond their understanding. The humans were not fighting for territory. They were not here for conquest. They were here to end the Empire, the final wall. The planetary defense grid activated as the human warship neared orbit. Gigantic plasma cannons, laser arrays, kinetic barriers all came online, weapons that had never been used in living memory. The ground shook as the Empire's last defenses lit up, blazing beams of fire stabbing into the sky in a desperate attempt to hold the line. For a moment, there was hope. The human ship trembled under the first impacts. Shields flickered. Armor glowed under the strain. Empire soldiers cheered, voices rising in frantic relief, but then the human warship shifted. With terrifying calm, it unleashed a storm of return fire. Precision strikes, cold and surgical, targeting the exact weak points of the defense grid. One by one, the planetary cannons were silenced. Power cores overloaded, towers crumbled into molten ruin. The Empire's proud final wall, built over centuries, died in less than 10 minutes. In the streets, the people screamed. The first human landing craft touched down on the outskirts of the capital, black shapes falling from the sky like metal rain. The ground troops emerged in perfect silence, dark armor, blank visors, weapons glowing softly in the ash-choked air. They moved with mechanical precision, their formation flawless, their pace unhurried. Every step forward was the slow death of the Empire. The Empire's remaining ground forces, thousands of soldiers with tanks, walkers, and air support, trushed to meet the invaders. Commanders barked frantic orders. Fighters screamed through the smoke-filled skies. The last battle for the homeworld began, but the humans were ready. They fought like no enemy the Empire had ever known, fast, efficient, cold. Every shot they fired struck true. Every movement was exact. Black-armored soldiers swept through defensive lines without slowing, cutting down Empire troops with terrifying ease. Explosions lit the streets. Walkers burned. Fighter craft spiraled into the ground in flaming wreckage. Within the first hour, entire divisions of Empire soldiers were gone. Those who survived began to break. Some threw down their weapons and fled. Others surrendered, hands raised, voices shaking. But the humans didn't stop. They didn't hesitate. They moved past surrender as if it didn't exist, continuing their silent march toward the heart of the capital, in the command citadel. The council finally collapsed into hysteria. "We must activate the failsafe," one screamed. "We must destroy the capital before they reach it." "No," another shouted, tears streaming down her face. "There are millions still alive down there. It doesn't matter," the first snapped. "We either die fighting or we die kneeling." But in the end, none of their words mattered, because the human warship was already overhead. From the ruins of the city's outer walls, the last lines of defense crumbled. Empire soldiers fell back street by street, the ground littered with wreckage and ash. The human forces pushed forward without pause, their weapons cutting down anything that resisted, their dark helmets reflecting the fires that consumed the skyline. And then they reached the palace, the ancient seat of Empire power. A towering, the structure of crystal and gold that had stood for 10,000 years. It had never fallen. It had never been touched by war until now. The human soldiers approached without sound. Explosions thundered behind them, but they didn't look back. They breached the palace gates with precision charges. Empire guards, the last defenders, fell in seconds. There were no speeches, no warnings, only the cold echo of boots on marble floors as the Death Worlders advanced through halls lined with the portraits of ancient rulers in the central chamber. The remaining council members huddled together, their once grand robes stained with dust and blood. They barely looked up as the doors blew inward and the black-armored figures entered. One counselor sobbed, another whispered prayers. Few stood in frozen silence. The humans raised their weapons. The flashes of light were swift, clean, final, and then it was over. The city burned in the distance. The Empire's flag, once raised over 1,000 worlds, fell from the palace towers, fluttering down into the ash-covered streets below. Above the broken world, the human warship drifted in cold silence, its mission not yet finished. The final wall had fallen, and still. The humans gave no words, No reason, no mercy, only silence. The empire was dead long before the last shot was fired. The once great cities lay in ruins, their towering spires broken and burning, their streets littered with the twisted remains of machines and bodies. Smoke choked the skies. The rivers ran black with ash. The screams of the dying faded into silence as the human warship drifted above the broken world like a silent shadow. Unmoved, untouched, across the homeworld, the survivors, those few who still clung to life, watched the end unfold with hollow eyes. Soldiers who had once stood proud dropped their weapons in despair. Civilians, too weak or too terrified to flee, huddled in the ruins, waiting for death that came without warning, without mercy. The humans moved through the rubble like cold machines, step by step, their black armor gleaming under the fires of a dying civilization. And still, they said nothing. No demands, no messages, no gloating. Just cold, brutal efficiency. The Empire's last broadcast, sent in desperation from a hidden bunker beneath the capital, flashed across the few remaining communication channels. We surrender. We surrender. Please. Stop. But there was no answer. The human soldiers didn't stop. They pressed forward, clearing the last pockets of resistance. One street at a time, one shattered building after another, their weapons silent, precise-ended, every fight before it could begin. No hesitation, no waste. No kindness. In the high mountains, far from the burning cities, a small group of surviving leaders gathered in silence. Their faces were pale, their eyes broken. The highest generals, the last political heads, the scientists, the thinkers, the ritual who had once ruled this mighty empire. We should have listened, one whispered, voice barely louder than breath. We should have never provoked them. Another, his uniform torn and blood-stained, shook his head in disbelief. They're not fighting for territory. They're not here to rule. They came to destroy. And that was the truth. It had always been the truth. The humans didn't want to occupy. They didn't want resources. They didn't even want revenge in the way the Empire understood it. They wanted one thing only: the complete erasure of the threat the Empire had once posed. And they were succeeding. The last Empire fleets scattered into deep space, their commanders fleeing like hunted animals. Some ships attempted to surrender, some tried to hide, but the human warships' fast, precise tracked them all. There would be no escape, no safe haven. Across the galaxy, the Empire's colonies, now leaderless and terrified, either fell into chaos or surrendered without a fight. Some planetary governors chose to burn their own cities rather than wait for the inevitable. Others broadcast desperate pleas for mercy, but no reply ever came. The name human had become something more than fear. It had become a death sentence on the burning homeworld. In the ruins of the capital, the last resistance fell. The great palace, once the heart of the Empire, was nothing more than broken stone and smoldering ruins. The banners of the Empire, tattered and blackened, lay scattered in the streets. The civilians who remained no longer begged. They no longer fought. They sat in silence, staring at the ground, waiting for the end, and through it all, the human soldiers moved without pause. They cleared the final districts. They destroyed every military facility. They dismantled the last defense networks with cold precision. No words, no anger, just the quiet, unstoppable rhythm of total annihilation. In one shattered square, a young Empire soldier, barely more than a child, knelt alone in the rubble, his weapon broken, his body shaking with exhaustion and fear. He looked up as the black-armored humans approached, their silent steps echoing in the burning air. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't speak. He simply closed his eyes, waiting for the shot that would end it, but it didn't come. The human soldiers passed him without a word, their visors reflecting the burning sky. They didn't care about survivors. They didn't need to. The Empire was already gone. Far above, the human warship hovered in silence, its weapons cooling, its engines idle. The mission was nearly complete, and across the stars, news of the fall spread like wildfire. Other civilizations, nations that had once feared the Empire's power, watched in awe and terror as the impossible unfolded before them. A single human warship had shattered the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known. It had done what no alliance, no coalition, no rebellion could ever achieve. It had ended the Empire, and it had done so without a word. Some races whispered that the humans were monstrous creatures born from a world so savage, so brutal, that no other species could understand their way of war. Others spoke of them as legends, beings forged from steel and ice, whose patience and silence were as terrifying as their weapons. All agreed on one truth: the humans were not to be provoked. Not ever again. Back on the ground in the last minutes of the battle, the skies began to clear. The fires still burned, but the sounds of war faded into the distance. The surviving humans regrouped. Their black visors turned toward the empty horizon. They didn't cheer. They didn't celebrate. Their mission was never about pride. It was about ensuring that this empire, would never rise again in the broken heart of the capital. A single transmission was finally sent, one that no empire ear ever heard, but which echoed across the human fleet: phase complete, target neutralized, returning home. Gachi-sai. And just like that, the black warship lifted from the ruins. The humans left. They didn't claim the world. They didn't raise flags. They didn't build monuments. They simply vanished into the stars, their dark engines flaring once more, leaving only silence behind. The Empire was gone. The galaxy would never forget. The war was over, but it ended without banners, without speeches, without mercy. The Empire, once the greatest power across countless stars, was gone. Its cities lay in ash. Its fleets were broken, its people scattered and afraid. And overhead, the human warship, black, silent, patient, vanished into the darkness, leaving only ruins and silence in its wake. For the survivors, the days that followed were worse than the war itself. The homeworld burned. There was no power, no order, no voice to guide the broken remains of a civilization that had ruled for 10,000 years. The streets were filled with quiet ghost people who moved without purpose, who spoke in whispers, their minds too shattered to understand what had happened. The humans had not stayed. That was the part that no one could explain. They had come and destroyed. And then they had left, without demands, without conquest. Without claiming a single piece of land or technology, they left because they never wanted the Empire's world. They wanted its memory erased from orbit. The trails of destruction stretched for miles, craters where cities once stood, glowing scars across continents, the black bones of what had been the Empire's greatest monuments. The military bases were gone, the command centers erased. The palace burned to dust. It was not just defeat, it was extinction. On the ground, survivors gathered in ruined halls, broken temples, shattered bunkers, faces pale, eyes empty. No, one spoke of rebuilding. No one spoke of revenge. There was only one question, spoken in soft, trembling voices. Why? Why had the humans done this? In a collapsed university beneath the capital, one of the last surviving scholars, her hands bloodied, from digging survivors out of rubble, whispered the answer to no one. They did this because we made them. The truth was simple. The Empire had poked the sleeping giant. Somewhere, somehow, they had touched something precious to the humans attacked. Provoked, violated in ways they thought would never bring consequences. But the humans had remembered. And when they came, they did not come like other species, with demands and negotiations. They came with silence. They came with precision. They came to finish the threat, not to win the war. Across the outer colonies, the news of the Empire's fall spread like wildfire. Planets that had lived in fear of imperial control for centuries suddenly found themselves free, not by choice, but because the Empire itself no longer existed. The remaining governors and warlords fought briefly for scraps of power, but none of it mattered. The shadow of the humans loomed over everything. No one dared claim the Empire's name. No one dared rebuild the old banners. Even in the lawless chaos that followed, one truth bound the galaxy together: the Death Worlders had destroyed the unbreakable. And if pushed, they could do it again. In the weeks that followed, strange rumors spread. Some said that in the deepest ruins of the Empire's capital, human soldiers had been seen after the fighting had stopped moving through the wreckage, gathering something. Others whispered of hidden devices, of silent scouts leaving coded messages buried in the ashes. Some even claimed that the humans had not left entirely, that their black ships still waited in the void, watching. But no one knew for sure. The humans never explained. They never returned, and the galaxy remembered. In distant systems, leaders of other civilizations gathered in private, their faces grim, their voices hushed. Every discussion ended the same way. Earth must never be provoked again. The Deathworlders, as they were now called in every tongue, were not conquerors. They were guardians of their own survival, cold, efficient, patient beyond belief. And when they moved, no one could stand against them. One by one, new treaties were signed. Old rivalries ended in whispers. Border disputes vanished overnight. No one wanted to risk waking the humans again. The memory of what had happened to the Empire was burned into every mind. Back on the ruins of the Empire's homeworld, life began to flicker back in strange, broken ways. Small communities gathered in the wreckage. A few voices began to speak of survival. But no one spoke of the Empire's return. That name was gone, buried beneath ash, silence, and fear. One old soldier, his scales scarred, sat by the shattered remains of a war monument, watching the smoke rise into the cold sky. He spoke to no one, his voice soft and cracked. "They didn't want our world," he whispered. "They wanted our fear. They had it forever." Far across the void, the human warship, its mission complete, drifted silently through deep space. Its engines pulsed softly in the dark. Its crew silent, discipline made, no mention of what they had done. There were no medals, no victory parades, only cold, quiet purpose. One of the human soldiers, her black visor reflecting distant stars, whispered through her "Come, target secured, returning home." That was all. And so the humans vanished once more into the endless black. The galaxy, shaken and broken, moved on. But no one ever forgot the lesson. Some wars were not about power. Some wars were not about conquest. Some wars were warnings. And when the Deathworlders moved, the galaxy itself remembered what fear truly meant.